everyone, and welcome back to my channel. First things first, I have a few announcements. So number one is I'll be uploading every Wednesday from here on out. And the other is, if you like me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So let's get into the video. The first book that I literally finished on the 1st of January was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And this book basically follows Oliver, and he is recently released from prison, and he's here to spill all the tea on what happened during his university time as a Shakespearean theater student when him and his friends experience a tragedy where one of his friends dies. So that's basically what this story is about. 3 stars. It does fall into the thriller, but like for baby wusses, so it was perfect for me. I did find it interesting as I've never really read a book about Shakespearean theater kids before. I really like that aspect as I was a previous theater kid myself, so I could relate to some of the struggles that they were going through, and also just I really loved reading about the theater aspect. Brought back a lot of memories for me. I also really enjoyed how Oliver and some of the other main characters, they are very fluid with their sexuality. And I thought that that added some dimension to the characters. Overall, like I said, I gave it a 3. It was an enjoyable story. I liked kind of going through the theater aspect. I liked the cutthroatness. I liked basically learning, kind of going through the discovery or like the thriller of what happened. But that being said, the reason why I gave it a 3 stars instead of like a 4 or 5 is because I did find the book to be rather predictable. I thought, you know, halfway through the book, I kind of figured out what happened. I was still, you know, hanging through just in case there were any like plot twists, like maybe it wasn't who I thought it was, but it was fairly obvious. So for me, it wasn't that interesting. Okay, book. It was still very entertaining and I enjoyed reading it. It just didn't have the boom boom, the wow factor that I was really looking for, and what I really look for in thrillers. So overall, not bad, but just not my favorite either. The second book that I read this month was Fruit of a Drunken Tree by Ingrid Rosas Contreras. I loved this book. I literally finished this book in about 8 days, and I gave it a 5-star rating. I thought it was just truly, truly, truly phenomenal. It was great. This book is a beautifully written tale about 2 girls, Chula and Patrona, whose lives intertwine as Chula's family takes on Patrona as a housekeeper in Bogota, Colombia, during the most notorious gang leader's rule in Colombia. So this book, just a little bit of a content warning, it does feature rape and violence. So just be aware of that. But I truly, really, really love this story. I thought that Ingrid did a really wonderful job at transporting me to Colombia. I've never been, but I really enjoyed that aspect. I think she did a really good job at the family dynamics, not only with Chula and her family, but also Patrona and her family, and how they come from 2 different worlds. And that's what I really kind of enjoyed about this, because Chula is from a wealthier family, whereas Patrona is from a poorer family. And it really is like a coming of age story in some way, as well as a like refugee story, as everything that Chula and her family have to go through during that terrifying reign of Pablo Escobar. And so it was really well written. I really enjoyed how Ingrid, she really put a lot of detail and a lot of attention to detail in the story. I thought that, you know, she really brought Bogota to life. And just the way that she wrote Chula and Patrona's friendship, I thought was just so beautiful, because in some ways it was a little bit of a secret friendship about how close they were, and just it was so touching to me at how Chula felt so like she needed to keep Patrona's secrets, and kind of how that goes into her life and what happens moving forward. And you know, towards the end of the book, you know, it definitely broke my heart, just everything that she had to go through, both her and Patrona, and all the trauma that they went through. I thought was just heartbreaking, and, you know, just the grief that they experienced and just everything from the emotional aspect of this book I thought was really well done. I actually ended up reading this book into the author's notes, which I think is why it really elevated the book from being an amazing, beautiful written book to a 100% 5-star rating for me, was that the author actually said in her author's notes that she had gone through a similar experience to Chula, and that she actually, and I don't want to give away like some of the books, but basically she wrote a fictional story about real things that happened in her life. And for me, it just brought the book to a whole nother level, that it was like, not only was it touching, but then to read that the author actually went through some of these things herself, I just, you know, my heart really went out to her. And then just her ability to write this beautiful story, because like I can imagine it was very traumatic for her, and to write through this story and really express what happened in a fictional way, so that the stories can divulge, both hers and Chula's can divulge, but also intertwined in certain levels, I thought was just really, really beautiful. So I would highly recommend this book if you get a chance to read it. The third book that I read this month was Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I thought that this book was truly amazing. It is a poetry book, so for those of you that don't really enjoy poetry, I actually would still recommend this book. I would listen to the audiobook, and the audiobook is actually read by Elizabeth herself. And I thought that it took the poetry to a whole nother level. It was just so beautifully written. And I liked that with her poetry, she actually told a story. And it was like about a Dominican girl that grew up in New York. And so I could just already relate how she's not only exploring herself, you know, her sexuality, coming into a woman, but also what it's like living as a woman in the world. And, you know, when she was talking about her religious family, I was just like, girl, tell me about it, because I already know. Like, I can relate, you know, especially growing up in a very Hispanic religious family. I can relate on some levels of what she was going through, and just how you know, religion was kind of pushed onto her, and how she was trying to discover her own relationship with God. And I really, really thought that it was really well written. And then not only that, but I think like Elizabeth, like, she deserves like all the accolades when it comes to reading poetry, because it was almost like a slam poetry in some ways, and in some of her like verses it was very slammy, and just I felt like, yes girl, like tell me more. I just wanted to just like snap along. And it was just, it's very short. It's a very, I think it was maybe like 2 hours, maybe 2-3 hours, something like that. So if you're looking for a really quick read, but is also just really beautiful, like her poetry is really well written and stuff, and tells like a very comprehensive story, I would truly recommend this book, because Elizabeth, literally, she kills it, and the audiobook is dope as hell. So listen to it, because it's really, really good. The fourth book I read this month was Depression and Other Magic Tricks by Sabrina Benam, I think is how you say her name. I'm sorry if I fucked it up. So this book is obviously a poetry book. It also is a relatively short book. This one I actually read, I didn't listen to the audiobook. Overall, I thought that this was a good poetry book. One thing that was really annoying to me was some of the format in some of them. It was like word dash, word dash, word dash, and I hate that format so much. It literally like drives me insane. So I found myself like skipping over those poems because I hated the format it was in. It just like, it was like a pet peeve of mine that I didn't really know that I had. So I thought it was okay. I didn't think the poetry was anything that was like mind-boggling or like just like so unique. But that being said, you know, like to be able to bear your soul like that on the pages in poetry, I think is just amazing in itself. So if you're into poetry, definitely give it a read. It's good. Just for me, it wasn't anything like amazing and outstanding, but it's a good book, and I realize how hard it is to put your poetry out there like that. That's definitely something that I would never have the courage to do, just because I'm just so private, and just that's like really shedding your vulnerability out there. And for everyone to judge, which I feel like is just so scary, especially when poetry is, you know, like I said, like the deepest corners of your soul. So, I mean, more power to her. She really, really did it. And, you know, it's good. So it was good. The fifth book that I read was Too Fat, Too Loud, Too Slutty, The Rise and the Reign of the Unruly Woman. So this book is written by Helen Ann Peterson. She was apparently a former, or is a BuzzRead writer. So at first I was like, not for me, because I'm not the biggest fan of BuzzFeed. I kind of feel like it's just like random quizzes about like what vegetable you would be. So like, I'm not that into it, but I picked it up. I thought the cover was beautiful, and it was interesting to me, you know, how she was talking about the rise and reign of unruly women. And for me, when I was reading this, I kind of came up with my own definition of unruly. And for me, being unruly is the ability to be your true authentic self and not giving a fuck about what society thinks. And so what I thought was really, really cool about this book was what she did was she selected, I think, about like 7 celebrities and talked about how they were unruly according to society and how they pushed the boundaries in society in different aspects. So for example, one was about Serena Williams. So they not only talked about her being too strong, but also how in some ways that she's too black for tennis. And when I say like too strong or too fat, like it's just that in, you know, when she talks about and goes through this book is that very much how she shattered what tennis people looked like, you know, what they looked like in quotations, because fuck that, but just how strong Serena was and how she really like changed the game of tennis, and how she did that not only by being, you know, strong, but by being her true and unapologetic self, no matter what. And I thought that that was just so interesting, because what she really does is she talks about these women and how they push the boundaries and how they did it and how society responded. And it just kind of really made me realize how much work we truly have as a society to do for women to be their true and true unruly selves. You know, like, yeah, we have come a really, really long way since like the feminist movement and the suffrage movement, like absolutely, but I think, you know, we still have a lot of things that we need to work on and we need to do in order to move forward as a society. And I think this book does a really good job at outlining. So, sixth book that I read this month was Vengeful by V.E. Schwab, which is the second book in the Vicious duology. I think it's a duology. If not, then the Vicious series. Overall, it was okay. Like, please don't kill me. Please don't. I know like some people really, really love this book, but it was okay. It wasn't anything fantastic for me. Like, do I love V.E. Schwab's writing? Yeah. Do I love some of the characters like Sydney and Victor? Absolutely. Do I want to be adopted by Mitch? 100%. I love the series and I love the world. I think it's kind of interesting how these extraordinary people come to life and how they get their powers, and then kind of the idea of some of them are good and some of them are bad, and just the choices that they made I think is really interesting and unique. But I found this book to be nothing special, unfortunately. Like, I didn't like the introduction of new characters. Like, it was okay. I didn't feel the emotional connection to them. So I was just like, okay. I actually got kind of bored reading this book. Like, there were a lot of chapters that I weren't really into. And that's why I gave it like a 3-star rating, because it was okay. Was it entertaining? Absolutely. Like, it was an entertaining read at some points. Like, you know, I like the world. I think the problem is when you compare the first one to the second one is a disappointment. And the final book that I read this month was Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. So we all know Harry Potter. We all know what Harry Potter is about. So I won't even go into a description. But I am rereading Harry Potter, mainly because I haven't read it actually since I was a child, since I was like kind of going through Harry Potter as it was coming out at that particular point. So it has been like a really nostalgic experience for me. And I liked the 5th book, and the Order of Phoenix. I thought it's interesting. It's actually one of my favorites. The Half-Blooded Prince is 100% my top favorite, next to the Goblet of Fire. But the Order of Phoenix is also really good too. So it was just as amazing as I remember. So I really enjoyed it. So those are all the books that I read this month. I read a total of 7. So we're doing pretty well in regards to how many books I'm trying to read in this year. And I also stuck to my goals. I do have a few books that were out of my comfort zones, like Too Fat, Too Loud, Too Fat, Too Slutty, Too Loud, The Rise and Reign of Unruly Women, which is a nonfiction book, so we hit check that. And I read a few books by people of color, which was fantastic, and they also happened to be Latina, so that was amazing for me, starting off the year strong, and starting it off with Latinas, because I also am Latina, so that was really cool to see myself represented in books. So overall, it was a great month. There was only like 2 books that were like okay, the rest I was like obsessed with, so that was a really great start. And even the okay books were still really fun. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.